Hello, good afternoon and welcome to our Tea Time SEO session. Today we've got three excellent speakers, as we have every time we do this, of course, and they're going to be talking to you about how to perform a content audit. We like to keep these shows short and sweet, just enough for a tea break. So I hope you've got your cup of tea at the ready or something stronger, depending on what time of day it is. And also, just before we get into it, I'd just like to say we've just set up an online community called The Optimizers. It's free to join at theoptimizers.authoritas.com. We're very much, as a brand, taking a backseat. It's really about the community, sharing content for the community, and we'll be sharing all our Tea Time SEO content we've published during the COVID lockdown over the last year or so in there. We've got some great people joining already. We're just doing it organically. So hopefully, if there's any questions you've got today, please join. And we'll do our best to answer them after the event. And also there's lots of other great things you can talk about, and if you're interested, you can see our product roadmap and comment on it and give us your suggestions. So without further ado, here's our three speakers, in no particular order, but that's how they are on the slide. I'd like to welcome Daniel Heredia, who's an SEO marketer at Casumo over in Barcelona. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you so much. Coming not so far away is Laura Monckton, who's a digital marketing specialist at the Access Group up in Derby.
Hello everyone.
They make business-to-business software. They seem to do everything apart from SEO. So I've been pitching our CEO shortly. And last but most certainly not least, and certainly the furthest away, is Greg Bernhardt, all the way from Milwaukee. He's an SEO strategist for Rocket Clicks, a leading digital marketing agency out in Milwaukee. Which, if you don't know, is sort of close to Chicago. So thank you all, and I'm going to turn it over to Greg to get started.
Yes, pleasure to be here. Go Milwaukee Bucks, if anyone's keeping track of the playoffs. I've been in NBA playoffs. I've been in SEO and web design and web development for almost 20 years now. Currently, I'm an SEO strategist for an agency in near Milwaukee, Wisconsin, called Rocket Clicks. Awesome agency, doing everything the right way. Couldn't be happier. Also, I am a founder of Physics Forums, one of the largest U.S. physics and STEM online communities. I'm also the founder and writer at importsem.com, which hosts Python SEO tutorials. And in fact, there is a tutorial that Daniel made there on mobile usability testing, so you want to check that out. It's pretty awesome. I love everything about SEO, the whole universe, but to be honest, I tend to veer into the technical, the deep semantic, of course, and Python SEO the last couple of years. So pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
That's super. Thanks very much. Over to Daniel to introduce himself.
Yep, I am Daniel. I am from Barcelona, as Lauren said, and now I'm working for a company called Casumo, which is an Egaming company, since January 2021 as an SEO marketer. So basically, I'm working together with developers to make the SEO optimizations happen in our platforms. And while I have experience with in-house teams and also working for agencies, 3 and 2 years, I don't have as much experience as Greg, but what I hope that I will be able to contribute. And well, my background is in economics, and well, I consider myself very nerdy, to be honest. So I like a lot technical SEO, Python automation, and it's that, so nerdy stuff. I am also following the NBA playoffs, so congrats for Milwaukee wins, Greg. And yeah, that's it.
Super. Thank you so much, Daniel. And last but most certainly not least, Laura.
Hi. So I'm based in the UK, and I'm excited to venture back to Barcelona in the US when we can. I'm currently a digital marketing specialist working for a large mid-market software company called the Access Group. And I've worked in marketing for over 6 years now, and it's only in the past 2 years or so that I've delved deeper into the world of SEO, and in my current role, particularly championing content as part of that. I've got a degree in English language and lit, so I've always held quite a strong interest in content and writing. And when I'm not working, I'm reading books. That said, I have got a 5-month-old puppy, so he takes up most of my spare time at the moment, a lot of confiscating things that he shouldn't have.
I know that feeling, that's for sure. Mine's quite quiet at the moment. Well, thank you, Laura, and thanks so much to everyone. Looks like we've got technical and creative side of content covered, so let's hit it off with Greg to set us going. Thanks, Greg.
Wonderful. Yeah, I wanted to approach this slide in my talk here to the activities before you look for opportunities, so to speak, and the individual tactics. It's more about, I want to come from what your mindset should be at, what concepts you want to be thinking about so that you can bucket your individual tactics into those so you can be comprehensive and know that what you're doing is really holistic. So I've identified 7 core concepts, and perhaps there's more, but these are the ones that I tend to always pay attention to when I first begin evaluating the content on whatever client or personal websites I'm looking at. The first will be accessibility, and I mean that very literally, not the disability accessibility that we're very used to, but simply the freedom at which crawlers and users move throughout your site to consume the content that you're putting out. So this includes the classic crawlability issues, which of course is very technical, indexability issues for sure for crawlers. You can have the best content in the world, but if they can't find it and users can't find it, it doesn't mean anything, right? So identifying what are those barriers for crawlers, what are those hoops or barriers for users as well to find the content within your site while they're there. We're talking navigation, we're talking internal search, we're talking on-page ease of mobility as well. I love to tell people, don't make people work to consume the content that you're trying to give them, right? Make it easy. Don't make them think. It should be brainless to consume the content that they're looking at and further content across your website. Also, relevance you want to think about. This is a huge one, right? Maybe one of the biggest is how to evaluate the topical signals that your content's giving off. I like to say everything is a signal. Sometimes we look at big chunks, this specific image or this specific paragraph, what is it communicating to Google and to users? But we can be granular with that. We've seen with machine learning and natural language processing down to the character in a word can sometimes matter, right? So don't take anything for granted. Make sure all the signals on the page are communicating exactly what kind of topical relevance you're trying to communicate. Sometimes we talk about having a creator's bias. If you've written the content or if you've made the page layout, we sometimes have an inherent, we think the understanding of what we're putting forth is inherently understandable because we were deeply involved in the creation of it. But that doesn't always exist with third party looking at it. It may not be so understandable. So don't take what you've done for granted. There's all kinds of tools right now that can help you understand how crawlers are looking at it, and maybe users as well. All kinds of natural language processing tools like WordLift. Google's got their NLP API. I think SEMrush has some content, natural language processing as well. So use those tools. Next, we want to talk about identity, and identity is really tied to authority as well. And that's all tied into, of course, one of our favorite topics is internal linking, right? So consider the strength of your internal web graph and future support for it. I like to think of web pages, specific web pages, as an analogy of villages, towns, and cities, right? What are the similarities of that? Is the connections and relationships, the roads into that content, and those roads into that content are hyperlinks within your website. And of course, you can send relevant signals to that as well through anchor text and text around those links as well. But what do we have in common with the big important content and the big important cities of the world? They have the most roads, right? The biggest city in history, Rome, all roads lead to Rome. So if whatever your biggest content is, most important content, make sure you've got those roads, those interlinks to that content. Next, we've got intent. Intent's been a hot topic for the last few years. Simply put, does the purpose of the page equal the purpose of the consumer, right? So we have our big buckets of navigational intent, informative, commercial, transactional, right? So if you've got a site on lizards or a page on lizards and it's like a wiki page, it's informative, but someone hops on that page but they want to buy a lizard. Well, the intent is a mismatch, so they're bouncing back to the SERPs, right? there's a new tool that was just put out in the last couple of weeks by the awesome duo at Snippet Digital called keywordinsights.ia. That's the domain. I beta tested it and basically matches your the keywords that you are trying to target for specific pages, and tries to, with machine learning, figure out the intent of it based on what's showing in the SERP listings on page 1. So if you have a keyword that is showing for the first page mostly transactional pages, Google's returning transactional pages, but your page that you're trying to rank for is informative, well, you got a mismatch. Maybe you need to go back to the drawing table and pick another keyword, or make that into a transactional page, right? Next, let's talk about value. Value is, what does the consumer gain from the consumption of that content? So we can look at it as, you can evaluate it as the content is either under satisfying their intent, satisfying their intent, or over satisfying their intent. And really, we want to over satisfy that intent, right? We want to satisfy why they got there, but also give them something more, right? We all know what that feels like when we go to a page and, ooh, that's exactly what I looked for, and wow, my universe just exploded with the offering that they're giving me. Sometimes that has to do with a level of a comprehensiveness. It doesn't mean that's not analogous with length, right? That's been the hot topic. How much? Back in 2010, it was everything. It has to be at least 500 characters of content, right? That was blown away, right? It's just whatever the intent is. If someone was looking for a definition, give them the definition. That's fine. It doesn't have to be 500 words of definition, right? But we always want to be thinking about, is the content that we have there comprehensive enough to over satisfy? Next, structure and UX. Obviously, how you organize your content is so important for crawlers, but for people as well, too. People understand conventions of categorization and taxonomy with tagging and classification and all that. It matters. It matters to Google. It matters to your audience. So that's kind of a holistic consideration of structure and UX, but we can look internally as well as on page for specific content. Do you have a logical heading structure? Do you have lists that are easy to scan, things like that? Also, media. What kind of media offerings do you have? Not everyone wants to consume things in a certain way, or not everyone wants to read. So, of course, you want to have text, but do you have a video offering? Do you have audio offering? Do you have imagery offering? Do you have next level offerings like virtual reality and augmented reality? I think that's going to be the next revolution coming, especially for e-com. So get on that. And then finally, organic performance. This is probably where a lot of people start, right? You hop into Google Search Console and Google Analytics. You do a comparison of the last 3 months versus the previous 3 months. You see what, losses you have for clicks, and that's what you kind of focus on to regain those losses. One of the best ways to quickly wrap this up that I find, there's a lot of talk about thin content, and that kind of ties into value. One of my best ways to find thin content is in Google Search Console. Go to the coverage report, then look at the excluded filter, and then the label crawled but not indexed. That's a signal to you that Google has seen, crawled the page, but doesn't value it enough to put it into their index. Misconception is that Google indexes everything. They don't have the resources or time for that. So they evaluate whether it's valuable to them. So that's at least a clue to say, hey, this page I thought was indexed, was valuable. Google's not saying it is. They don't give you too many more hints other than that, but it's a good start. So, and obviously you want to do a lot of SERP analysis too. You've got a certain page, you're losing clicks. Find out what your competition's doing, how they're ranking so well, that gap analysis. So that was a lot, but hopefully I gave you some interesting food for thought, and pleasure being here. Thank you.
Greg, that was great. You could talk probably for half an hour each one of those 7 core concepts, and
Indeed.
I expect I've got a million questions for you, but I'll save them to the end. So let's go, Daniel.
Yep. So when it comes to my tips, so I think that first of all, once you are going to take over a content audit, it's very important to understand what has been the purpose of creating the content, which is already on the website, right? Because sometimes you have the feeling when you're speaking with your in-house team or with an agency or with a client that maybe they have been creating content just for the sake of creating content, right? That there has not been strategy behind that. So I think that it's important to clarify this from the beginning and to challenge them, ask them, okay, what has been the purpose of creating this content? And I think that it's a good moment, right, to set a benchmark and try to come up with some KPIs to try to evaluate the performance of the content that you are going to optimize or you are going to create from now on. I think that another thing is that sometimes we are obsessed with checklists, right? We think that we need to be very organized, and I think that actually it's very important to be organized, but every single website, every single project is different. So sometimes you need to be ready to improvise, you need to challenge yourself as well, and to say, okay, I have gone over this checklist, but maybe there is something that I can do in a different way. So take the opportunity whenever you do a content audit to be original, to be creative. Yeah. Next one. And another thing is that sometimes, or I feel, or this is the way how I usually work, is that you need to take it from a holistic perspective. And I think that Greg did it very well, mentioning some of these items that I think that are important to take into consideration. So on the one hand, I think that it's very important to go over or to run a technical audit once you are also doing a content audit, because, you know, maybe there has been some content that is underperforming, and maybe it's not because of the quality of the content, it's because there is a blocker. So maybe the meta descriptions or the meta title formulas are not appearing enough. Maybe there is a problem with the internal linking and how Googlebot is able to access your post. Very typical, for instance, with paginations, or maybe, yeah, I think that usually with paginations in many blogs, there are many problems. Googlebot and other search engine bots struggle so much to find the content. So it's important to make sure that everything is as smooth as possible, right? So another thing is the web performance optimization. So yeah, you can have the best content on your page, but if it takes 20 seconds to load the page, I think that users will not wait for such a long time, right? So they will just go back, bounce back, and nobody will see your content. So it's important as well to make sure that your page is as fast as possible. And another thing is the template header. So sometimes there are such a messy templates, right? So they have like many H1s, they don't have H2. So I think that it's important to take maximum advantage of the header structure to try to optimize your pages for the keywords that you would like to run for. And another thing is analyzing what your competitors are doing. I think that it's super insightful. You can get many insights about the topics that they are covering, the technologies or the type of content that they are using. So maybe they are using a plugin which enables them to show dynamic content. Maybe it's something that the users are searching for and you should have as well, right? Or maybe they have infographics, they have videos. So take the chance of going over what your competitors are doing, because maybe this is what actually the users are searching for, and you should adapt your content to that. And I think that another thing is schema, right? I think that some competitors might be using some schema markup that you would be interested in using as well. So yeah, check it out and see what the competitors are doing when it comes to internal links as well, the anchor text that they are using, if they are using, for instance, related articles, etc. So it's important to take it from a holistic perspective, because at the end of the day, the content is there, but we also need to take into consideration what the frame is. And even I said that I am not obsessed with checklists. I think that it's good, as I said, to be organized and to have a reference point. So at least when I run a content audit, what I do or the steps that I follow are, first of all, the URL selection and keyword mapping. So what are the keywords that we would like to target and with what URLs, the content gaps, and this is very related to the competitors analysis, right? What our competitors are doing or what keywords they are covering that maybe we are not covering. Also, when it comes to branded searches, I think that it's important to give an answer for everything that the users are searching for, right? So you might need to create dedicated content to answer the most important questions or queries that your customers or your potential customers might have. Also, the toxic content, and sometimes when we are speaking about toxic content, it does not need it doesn't need to be content which is going to give us or which is going to make us penalized. We are speaking as well about cannibalization. We are speaking about waste of crawl budget. So, for instance, if you see that there is a section of your website which is not bringing any sort of traffic, maybe you should not index it because maybe there is no one searching for it. And when it comes to off-page content, I think that it's important as well to go over your backlinks profile and disavow those ones that could be toxic. And internal linkings, do we have contextual links, the anchor text, paginations? I think that it's good as well to contemplate the option of adding breadcrumbs, which can benefit the internal linking, checking what is the underperforming content, and which could be the quick wins for your website and CTR improvements. And I think that mainly it's important to go, as I said before, over the branded searches. So it's important to take maximum advantage of those branded searches because they are customers or they are potential customers that are very, very close to convert because they already know our brand. The schema opportunities, which is also very related to the competitors analysis, but also about investigating if there is any schema markup that could be suitable for your business. Keyword clusters. So when you map the different keywords, it's good as well to categorize them because there might be different clusters that might have different purposes. We can differentiate the branded cluster, the top of the funnel cluster, the money keywords, etc. And finally, last but not least, the topic relevance. So it's important as well to, as I said before, to not create content just for the sake of creating content. So we need to differentiate or we need to understand what is the why this topic or this content is relevant for our business. Are potential customers interested in that, or is just some sort of content that could bring traffic but not benefit our business? And finally, so this checklist might seem endless, but it's good to mention that there are some tools like Audit, Python, or many other solutions in the market that can speed up the content audit. So I think that it's good to bet for automation because at the end of the day, most of the times will make your life much easier. And sometimes I think that it's very important to automate things because you are very likely to make mistakes when you are doing very tedious or very boring stuff related to, for instance, just getting data from different tools, right? So I think that it's important to automate your workflows and your content audits as much as possible.
I think everyone on the call will be supportive and agreeable with that. That's for sure.
Sure.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for that, Daniel. I think we're just going to pass over to Laura, who's going to sort of cover a bit about processes as well. Laura, take it away.
Brilliant, thank you. So I've recently conducted a content audit for my company and previous companies. So some of the things that really stood out to me as working well, I'll try and share with you today. So The first kind of tip from me would be kind of setting up an assessment criteria up front. So depending how big your website is and how much content you have, this criteria will really help you filter through and make it more manageable for you. I think it's really important to align that criteria with your objective so you can keep, cull or rework what's most important to you. So that might mean taking a closer look at your personas. It might mean going back to basics by making sure you know if a piece of content is hoping to either engage users, build the brand, or focus on conversions. I think another thing as well to think about is what does good look like for you and your industry. So when I've audited before, we come across lots of different sectors and industries, and a high number of page views on one kind of industry page might look completely different to another industry. So benchmark against your competitors, understand what good looks like for your sector, and then you can really understand where you're kind of performing against those benchmarks. Which kind of leads me on to drawing upon all the data sources available to you. So I've listed a couple there: Screaming Frog, Google Analytics. Kind of take a true look at what you've got with Screaming Frog and then cross-reference it with Google Analytics, see where which pieces of content are getting traffic, or if it once did and then petered off over time. If it is receiving traffic, where is that traffic coming from? So cross-reference with Google Search Console, your keyword ranking reports. Make sure that your content pieces, if they do have any traffic in the organic search landscape, you don't want to lose that. You only want to build upon that. Having said that, I think it's also worth being really mindful of other channels. So I've had examples before where I've seen a blog that wasn't ranking well from an organic perspective, but had really high engagement rates and good volumes of traffic coming from social. So don't forget to consider the bigger picture, talk to your teams, understand the business need as a whole. You don't want to lose a piece of content that's working well for your users or for your sales team, for example. Can you go to the next slide, please? I think it probably goes without saying as well. So the audit should probably definitely lead to action. So decide up front how you're planning to tackle the audit findings, especially if you're in a bigger team. Outline responsibilities from the start, set yourself some deadlines, tying back in the actions and the checklists that Greg and Daniel mentioned. Have those checklists to help keep you on track and not forget anything as you're working through. The checklist as well might look different depending on how the piece of content is performing and what the objectives of that piece of content is. So if it's getting good traffic, ranking well, still relevant, in date, that's brilliant. But then you might want to consider, what is the exit rate like? Can you signpost the user to another piece of content or add in another relevant next step to retain and engage that user further? I guess there's always small improvements and tweaks that we can be making. If it used to get good traffic, but it's dropped off, or if it's been indexed in Google, but not ranking very highly, you're going to want to update that. So take a closer look at your meta tags, refresh your copy. Is it keyword optimized? Can you add any additional value into that piece? Does it have enough internal links pointing back to it? All of the things that the guys talked about. So some of the content may need rewriting or reworking completely. It might be that it's really content light, and in hindsight, you might want to expand on the topic completely. So this is where I've really found Google's guidance to self-assess your quality content super helpful. It gives you a guide to be really critical with yourself. So Greg mentioned earlier about that creator bias. Having a checklist from Google to kind of really question, am I meeting the searcher intent here? Am I providing value to the user? Am I being unique and original in my content? Sometimes having that from an external source can really drill you down into, am I doing what I need to do here to be top of the game? If you've got more than one piece of content on the same or similar topic, consolidate them. Having multiple pieces of content can cause mixed signals on the same topic. So 10 blogs definitely are not better than one. Make sure that any unpublished content is redirected to a next relevant alternative destination as well. When you're updating, make sure that you prioritize those fixes. So everyone's time strapped, and think about how you can use your time most effectively. I won't say quick wins, because we don't say quick wins in SEO, but prioritize editing pieces of content where you can probably see the most impact sooner on, and then prioritize the longer stuff afterwards. Look at where there are gaps in your content and consider where competitors are succeeding ahead of you. That might be a strategy you employ to get yourself in the running. Last but not least, I'd say be reiterative. So take stock of what you've got, look at what's working for you, and always refer back before taking a step forward. So look to edit, repurpose existing pieces of content rather than simply building blindly on top. You don't want to be creating content for the sake of it. Audits are so time consuming, and maintaining your content should be an ongoing part of your day-to-day workload. It's a crucial part of the content lifecycle, and reiterating and editing that content will be much more efficient in the long run.
Perfect. Laura, that's great. A great way to finish, just reiterating that this thing is that it's not static, it's a continual part and there's a life cycle to it. So it's a good way to finish off. Thank you, everyone. That was super. I don't know that, Carrie, you've got any questions from the people that have been commenting online?
Yes, we've got a question for Greg from Dave. What are some of the tools that you use to help to determine concepts like intent and relevance?
Ooh, big topic. I did mention the Snippet Digital platform that was just released called keywordinsights.ia. I don't know if there's anything else quite like that. Maybe someone else can chime in on that. But as far as intent,
I've just got to say I hadn't come across it until you mentioned it in your slide, and I really like what they're doing. And that's me as someone who's been building SEO tools for 10 years. Funny enough, we've been working on something very similar, but it's actually more complementary to that. So with user intent and what we call the smell of the SERP. What does Google want, which is Laurent Bourly, the French SEO's term. So I think, I think that's probably one of the best ones I've seen. So well done, Snippet Digital. Thanks, Greg. Carry on.
That's probably about it for right now. And if you have Authoritas has a similar functionality or within that realm, I would love to test it out.
What they've done, we haven't quite released what they've done yet, and we promise we won't copy you guys. We've got our own enough work to do, but we have user intent for our keyword ranking. We use a real browser and we analyze the user intent. But we've been working on an algorithm to understand the smell of the SERP. If you read any of Laurent Bourly's stuff about this, which is excellent, he's leading French SEO. Me and him think very similarly. It's about understanding what Google wants. What does the SERP smell like, and then trying to guide you. And that looks like what their tool is doing as well, which is hats off to them. So that's great.
Exactly, and I mean you can, and Daniel can probably speak to this too as well. With the Python universe is trying to provide tutorials and scripts to provide this kind of machine learning as well at a certain level. But certainly the commercial tools that are coming up currently are really comprehensive, and I'm very interested in seeing where they go here on out.
Also on that relevance point, in our platform, for example, and we'll try and analyze the relevance as well as the influence of the external links to your site. So obviously that's an important measure, not just talking about search when it comes to relevance. You talked about topical signals, I think, as part of your talk to set us off. So I've got plenty of questions on that in a second, but let's hear from the audience if there's any others, Carrie.
I think the rest are all yours, Lawrence.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So, guys, I won't keep you very long because obviously we try and keep these short. But I work very much, I'm quite visual, so you can see that you won't be able to see that, but I've been drawing pictures as we've been going here. Because for me, sort of Laura finished off, she talked about this continuous process. Greg, you started out with talking about these 7 core concepts you thought was excellent in terms of accessibility, relevance, identity, intent, value, structure, and organic performance. And then Daniel came in with his really helpful sort of checklist of, how you can go out and find the right opportunities for your business and go after them. So the question I've got is, for me, that's a process. And we all use lots of SEO tools. And obviously, we pull them all together in platforms, or you have a million different tools. But what I'm more interested in, rather than tools, is the process. And when you're doing a content audit, what process do you follow and what do you fix first? So I don't know who wants to come in on that, but if you think about it, you could have problems across your site in all sorts of different areas. So what is your starting point? I won't pick on anyone, but I'll pick on you, Daniel. You look like you're closest to the microphone.
Yep. No, so I think that it's important to try to work in parallel things at the same time. So basically, for instance, I think that if you happen to find something, a technical blocker, like for instance, I don't know, problems with paginations, but you also find, or you also think that you need to improve your content. So, I mean, I think that it's important to not get stuck only with one thing. So I think that it's important to involve as many stakeholders as possible. I think that it's important to try to move along, but with different items at the same time. So for instance, I think that to start with, I would try to get involved the technical team, so that once we also get some insights about if there is any problem with technical stuff, we can activate them as soon as possible to get it fixed. But at the same time, we would also like to start working with content creators, right, to start modifying or to start extending some of the pieces of content that maybe are not comprehensive enough. So it's difficult to say to have a determined workflow, but I think that it's important to try to move along in different directions at the same time, so that you don't get stuck.
It makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, the optimization process, if it was, if it was serial, it would just take forever. I suppose you'd never get anything done. But a question, I suppose, just to follow up on that is: isn't there a danger then that you're changing multiple things at a time, and you may not actually know what's moved the needle, because you may not have the luxury of having time for A/B testing, for example?
I mean, that can be a risk, but at the same time, if you want to try to move fast, or if maybe it might be the best approach. So, I mean, it depends a little bit on the approach that you would like to take. Or maybe, I mean, at the end of the day, some of the things that we have said are like best practices, right? So there shouldn't be any risk on what we are doing. Of course, you need to be very careful with the technical implementations, because sometimes there could be some risks to spoil something in your website. But it depends on how much risks you are willing to take, right?
Okay. Definitely. Greg, Laura, do you want to come in on that? I don't know whether Greg.
I think I'd build upon what Daniel said. So I'd identify where the big blockers were. I'd try and see if there were things that were having the biggest impact and fix those first. I guess it would depend what the issues were as to which things you would tackle first. You'd have to kind of look at what was broken or what was causing any issues, and then identify from there which things would make the biggest impact sooner on, and then go from there.
Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting question, and almost maybe impossible, because it depends on the prioritization set from the opportunities or issues found from the classical audit process. And I think Daniel makes a good point about parallelization. That it's usually more efficient, at least parallelization with similar opportunities or fixes, right? So Lawrence, you're saying, if you're making changes across the board in different kind of those opportunity buckets, how do you know which one's working? Or if something actually you're on a downtrend, well, what do you need to revert back? You can kind of mitigate that a little bit by at least kind of bucketing those opportunities, and you can parallelize your workflow within those. But maybe, right, you don't want to wholesale do a bunch of technical fixes along with a bunch of content, value add fixes, and then you're really lost if the needle isn't moving the direction that you expected. Exactly.
All right. Well, look, I think for me, it's one of those things, like you say, there's no right or wrong answer. And I'm sure you've all looked at different websites when you've worked at agencies or in-house, which have had a myriad of different problems. And sometimes the business owner has a different view of what they want fixed first as well. So there's lots of things to factor into this. Certainly, for me, I probably will wrap up now because it's 40 minutes and that's everyone's cups of tea will be being cold. But there's lots of really great stuff in there. So thank you again for sharing, for taking the time to prepare the slides. I know even though it's one slide or a couple of slides each in 5 minutes, it still takes a lot of time to prepare. So thank you so much for doing that. We'll be posting the stuff on the Insiders community, out on social media, etc. And so if you've liked it, please share it, guys. Please like the videos, and please join us in the community where hopefully we can continue debating this and many other great SEO topics. And I think the next time we're on, Carrie, is the 24th of June. Is that correct?
Yes, 24th of June, where we'll be discussing practical implementation of user intent.
Okay.
So join us for that talk.
All right. Super. Well, and if the speakers could just hang on for 2 minutes, but we'll say goodbye to everybody else online. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next month. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.